"Sir, can I buy a dad?" A little girl walked into the millionaire CEO's office. What he did next changed everything. It was a quiet Wednesday morning at Blake Enterprises. The polished marble floors reflected the soft light pouring in through the towering glass windows. Executives moved quickly, tapping at their phones, murmuring into Bluetooth earpieces. In the midst of that daily rush, Christian Blake stepped into the lobby, as precise and composed as always. Tall, impeccably dressed in a pale blue tailored suit, his tie knotted with intention, Christian carried the air of a man who ruled entire markets. At 35, he had been dubbed the ICE CEO by financial media for a reason. He was brilliant, efficient, and emotionally unreachable. He nodded slightly at his assistant waiting near the elevator, a folder of briefing documents in hand. Then something caught his eye. Near the front desk, a little girl sat quietly on the polished tile floor. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Her blonde curls framed a delicate face with wide blue eyes that looked startlingly familiar. She wore a white dress, slightly wrinkled, a denim jacket too big for her frame, and scuffed sneakers. In her lap sat a tiny pink backpack covered in faded sparkles. No one else seemed to notice her. Executives walked past, too busy. The receptionist looked at Christian uncertainly, as if unsure whether to intervene. Christian hesitated, something tightening in his chest. Then, against everything his schedule dictated, he walked toward the child and crouched in front of her. "Are you lost?" he asked gently. The little girl looked up at him, her eyes clear and calm. Then she held something out in her tiny hand. It was a hair clip, small, plastic, shaped like a butterfly with faux crystal wings dulled by time. "I want to buy a dad," she said seriously. "I have this. It's special." Christian stared at her, stunned. He wasn't sure what surprised him more, the request or the way his heart seemed to physically shift at her words. He took the clip from her hand, gently, turning it over. Something about it felt oddly familiar, but he couldn't place it. He cleared his throat. "Why? Do you want to buy a dad?" The girl blinked slowly. "Because Mommy cries at night. She tries to be quiet, but I hear her. I just want to help her smile again." Christian's breath caught. He had weathered corporate collapses, hostile takeovers, lawsuits worth billions, but he was completely unprepared for this. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she said, standing up, brushing invisible dust from her dress. "I'm 4.5. He smiled faintly. "Well, Lily, I'm Christian," she nodded, accepting that as if she had just signed a deal. "I can't pay you," she said, almost apologetically, "but I'll share my pancakes if you help Mommy." Christian's mouth twitched. "That's a pretty good offer." Then after a moment he said softly, "Let me be him, for free." Lily's eyes lit up, not with joy, but with something much deeper. Trust. She stepped forward, wrapped her tiny fingers around his, and whispered, "Daddy, help Mommy?" His phone buzzed in his pocket. His assistant stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Blake, you're 9 o'clock." Christian raised a hand without looking back. "Cancel everything," he said. "You want me to cancel your board meeting?" Christian looked down at Lily, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm going with her." The lobby fell still. Phones stopped mid-scroll. Conversations halted. People watched as the man they thought they knew walked away from the very structure he had built, led by a child no taller than his knee. Christian didn't care. He tightened his grip gently around Lily's hand, and together they walked out of the building. The door shut behind them with a soft hiss, muffling the buzz of corporate urgency, leaving only the sound of Lily's small footsteps echoing beside his. He didn't know where this was going. He didn't know who this little girl really was, or what he would find when he met her mother, but for the first time in years, his heart felt awake. He looked down at the hair clip still in his hand. The dull plastic glinted faintly in the morning sun. It was, somehow, the most valuable thing anyone had ever offered him. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building, with peeling paint and rusted banisters. The hallway smelled faintly of damp carpet and boiled rice. Christian followed Lily up the narrow stairs, still gripping her tiny hand, not sure where they were going, only knowing he had to follow. At the door, Lily pulled a small key from her backpack and unlocked it with the confidence of someone who had done it many times before. She pushed it open. Inside, the light was dim, the windows clouded with dust. A thin blanket was folded on the old sofa. A few toys sat in the corner, and drawings were taped carefully to the wall. In the center of the room, lying back on a worn couch, was a woman. Her skin was pale, her golden hair clipped back in a low, tired bun. She turned her head slowly at the sound of the door. Christian stopped cold. "Rebecca?" His voice was quiet, disbelieving. The woman blinked, trying to sit up. "Christian Blake," she whispered. Time seemed to fall away in that moment. Her face was thinner now, her eyes lined with exhaustion, but still the same soft hazel, still the girl who once made him believe in magic. Lily ran over and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. "Mommy," she said, "I found him." Rebecca's lips trembled. "Found who?" Lily turned and pointed. "My daddy. I told you he'd come." Christian stood frozen. The air in the room thickened. He looked at Rebecca again, this time not as the woman lying before him, but through the haze of memory. It had been raining that day. He remembered standing in the university library, bouquet of red roses in one hand, a small wrapped box in the other. He had waited for hours by the corner table where she always read. He had texted, called, looked for her everywhere. Then, just as he was about to leave, he'd seen her, across the street, in the downpour, standing in the shadows. Her eyes locked with his for only a second before she turned and ran. He'd never seen her again. All she left behind was a letter, folded into his mailbox the next day. A quiet goodbye. No explanations, just 4 lines. "I'm sorry. I wish the world had been different. Please don't wait for me. Be who you're meant to be. Don't look back." He had cried. The only time he could remember doing so as an adult. 2 months later, still heartbroken, he accepted his mother's push to study abroad, and now, years later, here she was. "I didn't know if I'd ever see you again," Christian said, voice low. Rebecca's eyes brimmed. "I never wanted to leave like that. I couldn't let you see what I was going through." He took a step closer. "Why, Rebecca?" She swallowed hard. "After my dad died, everything fell apart. My mom got sick, hospital bills, medications. I had to drop out, work full-time, sleep on floors. I thought, if I stayed, I'd only drag you down. And your family, they would have never accepted someone like me. You could have told me. I was ashamed," she whispered. "And then I met someone. He said he'd help with the bills if I married him. But it was a lie. He drank. He hit. When I got pregnant, I knew I had to leave." Christian's throat tightened. He looked down at Lily, bright-eyed, innocent, unaware of the storm that had brought her into the world. "She's not mine," he said softly, more to himself than anyone. Rebecca shook her head. "No, but she's the best thing I've ever done." Christian slowly pulled something from his pocket. The little plastic hair clip, the one Lily had handed him hours earlier. "I gave you this," he murmured, "the day I planned to tell you how I felt." Rebecca gasped, hand covering her mouth. "You still had it?" She did. Tears slipped down Rebecca's cheeks. "I never forgot you, Christian, not for a single day." He walked closer, kneeling beside her. "And I never stopped loving you." Lily climbed up onto the couch between them and looked up at Christian. "He's my dad," she said simply, resting her hand on his knee. It wasn't a declaration or a question. It was truth, spoken with childlike certainty. Rebecca began to sob quietly. Christian reached out, instinctively wrapping an arm around her. She didn't resist. They stayed like that, 3 souls tangled in silence, stitched together by pain, time, and the strange kind of hope that only rises when everything else has fallen apart. In that moment, nothing else existed. Not the past, not the mistakes, not the lost time. Only now, only this, only the fragile, miraculous chance to begin again. The gate creaked open slowly as Christian's car pulled into the long driveway of his private estate on the outskirts of the city. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting a warm gold hue across the stone path and manicured hedges. Lights glowed softly from the windows of the expansive home, a place built for luxury, but until now untouched by warmth. Rebecca sat quietly in the back seat, her head leaning gently against the window. Lily, nestled beside her, hummed softly to herself, still holding the stuffed bunny, missing one ear. Christian glanced at them through the rearview mirror. The image stirred something strange and tender inside him. The housekeeper greeted them at the door with a cautious smile. She had been given only minimal instruction: set up the guest suite, prepare light meals, and say nothing. The guest room had been transformed. A queen-sized bed with fresh linens, soft lighting, a reclining chair by the window. Christian had even ordered a child-sized bed for Lily, complete with star-pannered sheets and a plush pillow shaped like a moon. He showed them the room, uncertain, almost nervous. Rebecca looked around and whispered, "This is too much." Christian shook his head. "You need comfort. You deserve more." She gave him a small, tired smile, but he could see the discomfort behind it, her eyes scanning the luxury, as though trying to find a corner small enough to hide in. Over the next few days, Christian's schedule flipped on its head. He canceled meetings, delegated projects. He spent his mornings attempting, unsuccessfully, to cook oatmeal that didn't burn. He ordered a humidifier after Googling what helped with chemo coughing. He even researched child nutrition to plan better lunches for Lily. There were awkward moments. He spilled soup, knocked over Lily's juice twice, and once burned a pot so badly the kitchen smelled like charcoal for hours. But he kept trying. Lily adjusted quickly. She danced through the halls, played in the garden, and fell asleep curled up beside her mom each night. Rebecca remained quieter, still weary. Sometimes Christian would find her staring at a reflection in the hallway mirror, lost in thought. On the fifth night, a sudden fit of coughing jolted the house awake. Christian rushed to the guest room, where he found Rebecca hunched over the side of the bed, struggling to breathe between spasms. Her hands trembled. She was trying not to wake Lily, who was still asleep in her small bed nearby. Christian dropped to his knees, grabbed a towel, held her up as she heaved. He didn't flinch at the mess. He just held her steady, whispering softly, "It's okay. I've got you. You're safe." He stayed with her through the night, cleaned her up, rubbed her back, wiped her forehead. When her breathing finally settled, she leaned into him, eyes closed, too exhausted to speak. The next morning he brought a doctor to the house, quiet, respectful, gentle. He didn't let Rebecca lift a finger. When she tried to protest, saying she didn't want to be a burden, Christian simply said, "You're not. Not now. Not ever." That afternoon they sat together in the small sunroom just off the kitchen. Rebecca wore a soft robe, her face pale but peaceful. Christian sat across from her, sipping coffee. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In silence, they watched Lily chase butterflies in the garden, her laughter filtering through the open windows. Christian looked at Rebecca, his eyes full of something new, something softer than sympathy, deeper than guilt. A kind of reverence. She caught his gaze and held it. For the first time, she didn't look away. There were no declarations, no apologies, just the quiet understanding between two people who had both been broken by life in very different ways, and were now learning, slowly, how to piece themselves back together, side by side, and maybe, just maybe, with time, they could become whole again. A month had passed. Rebecca's strength had begun to dip lower with each round of treatment. She spent more time in bed, her body aching from the inside out, her appetite reduced to sips of water and the occasional bite of toast. The house had adjusted to a gentler rhythm. Meals were quieter, lights dimmed earlier, and Christian's presence grew steadier with each passing day. Then, one morning, he found her standing in front of the mirror in the guest room, her back slightly hunched, hands clutching the hem of her robe. She hadn't noticed him yet. Her fingers trembled as they reached up, brushing against her scalp. Most of her hair was gone now. What remained were thin, scattered strands, clinging weakly to her pale skin. In the daylight streaming through the window, her reflection looked fragile and foreign, a ghost of the woman she used to be. She let out a breath, soft and broken. "I look like a ghost," she whispered to the mirror. Christian stepped inside quietly. "No," he said. "You look like a fighter." Rebecca flinched, startled. "Don't," she said quickly, turning away. "Please, don't try to make this beautiful." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked to the dresser and picked up a folded silk scarf, a soft shade of teal, like sea foam under moonlight. He sat on the edge of the bed, opened it slowly in his hands, then looked at her. "Sit with me?" he asked. She hesitated, her chin quivering. But something in his voice, gentle, steady, without pity, made her walk toward him. Christian reached out and helped her sit down gently beside him. He didn't touch her yet. He just let the silence breathe between them. "I bought this scarf the day I saw the color of your first notebook," he said. "That old beat-up one you always brought to the library. You said the color calmed you." Rebecca stared at the scarf in his hands. She hadn't thought about that notebook in years. "I kept it," she whispered, "even when I had to sell almost everything else." Christian unfolded the scarf and carefully raised it. He paused, letting her see what he was doing. "May I?" She nodded once, tears already brimming in her eyes. He gently wrapped the scarf around her head, tying it softly at the nape of her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, warm and careful. Then he leaned back and looked at her, not just with kindness, but with awe. "You're beautiful," he said, "inside and out." Rebecca's lip trembled. "How can you still say that?" Christian reached up and touched her cheek lightly. "Because I see you. Not the hair, not the pain. You." She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her face. "I used to think no one would ever want to see me like this," she whispered. "I want to," he replied. "Every version of you. Because none of them are broken to me." He stood and took her hand, guiding her slowly to the mirror. Rebecca stared at her reflection. The scarf was soft, graceful. It framed her face in a way that didn't feel like hiding, but like honoring something precious. She looked different, but not less, not diminished. She looked strong, quietly radiant, real. For the first time since her hair began to fall, she didn't turn away from the mirror. She leaned forward slightly and touched her cheek. Her eyes welled up again, but this time, the tears weren't from shame. "I don't recognize her," she said softly. Christian moved behind her, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "Then let me introduce you." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "This is Rebecca, the woman I fell in love with twice, once in silence and once in truth. The woman who raised a daughter with nothing but grit and love. The woman who makes this house feel like home." She stared at him through the glass, overcome. "Do you really mean that?" she asked. "I've never meant anything more," he said. Rebecca breathed out slowly, her hands resting on the scarf. She nodded, just a little. And in that small, silent gesture was something massive. Acceptance. Of her reflection. Of his love. Of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was still whole. They didn't speak again that evening. But when Lily tiptoed in to say goodnight and curled up next to her mother, Rebecca smiled softly. Not because she looked the same as she once did, but because, finally, she no longer needed to. The sun was just beginning to rise when Christian stood in the kitchen, holding a small pink hairbrush in one hand and a blue ribbon in the other. Lily sat patiently on a stool in front of him, her tiny legs swinging, her golden curls wild from sleep. "Okay," he muttered under his breath. "How hard can this be?" Lily giggled. "You're doing it backwards, Daddy." He blinked. "I am?" She nodded solemnly. "The bow goes on top, not under." Christian exhaled in defeat and crouched down beside her. "Deal. but you're going to have to teach me again tomorrow." She leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Okay." 20 minutes later, they were walking hand in hand through the doors of Little Pines Preschool. The hallway smelled like crayons and glue sticks, and the walls were covered with finger paintings and construction paper animals. Children laughed and tugged at parents. Backpacks bounced against tiny shoulders. Christian, 6'3" in a navy new blazer, looked completely out of place. Rebecca had wanted to come, but the night before had been rough. Nausea and fatigue had kept her in bed. Christian had told her to rest, promising he could handle it. Now, standing inside the classroom, he wasn't so sure. A woman in a floral blouse approached with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Hi there. I'm Miss Howard, and you must be—" She glanced between Lily and Christian. He gave a small, respectful nod. "Christian Blake. I'm her—" He paused, looking down at Lily, who was already clutching his hand tightly. "I'm her dad." Miss Howard's smile widened. "Wonderful. Welcome, Mr. Blake." From the side of the room, Christian heard a few murmurs. A group of other parents had turned, whispering. One pointed discreetly in his direction. He recognized the glance. He'd seen it before, on red carpets, in boardrooms, on the covers of glossy magazines. But this time, it didn't sting. He looked down at Lily and smiled. She whispered, "Are they talking about us?" He knelt to her level. "Maybe. But we're too cool to care, right?" She grinned. "Right." After helping her hang her tiny coat on a hook labeled Lily R., he kissed the top of her head and told her he'd be waiting outside at the end of the day. She waved and ran off to the coloring station, her pigtails bouncing behind her. Back in his car, Christian sat for a long time before starting the engine. His heart felt full in a way he hadn't expected. Later that afternoon, after a quiet work session in his home office, Christian returned to find a surprise waiting on his desk. It was a drawing, messy crayon lines and bold colors. 3 stick figures stood beneath a big yellow sun. One had a tie and glasses. One had short spiky hair and a blue scarf. The smallest had a crown made of hearts. Above them, in large wobbly letters, was a single word, Daddy. He stared at it, not for a minute, not even for an hour, but for the rest of the day. He didn't frame it, he didn't post it, he just let it sit on his desk. And every time he looked at it, he felt something shift again inside him, not like an earthquake, but like the ground finally settling after a long, long storm. He had spent his whole life building towers of success. Now, with a crayon picture and a little girl who believed in him completely, he realized, he was finally building a home. The hospital room was quiet, bathed in the pale light of a late afternoon sun filtering through half-closed blinds. Machines beeped softly in the background, tracking the fragile rhythms of life. Rebecca lay motionless, her face pale, her body weakened from the 5th round of chemotherapy. She had barely touched the soup Christian had brought earlier. Christian sat beside her, fingers gently wrapped around her hand. His once sharp eyes now carried the weight of sleepless nights and unspoken prayers. The room, sterile and white, felt like a waiting room between hope and heartbreak. Rebecca stirred slightly, her lips parting. "If something happens to me," her voice was barely a whisper, "promise me you won't let Lily grow up feeling alone." Christian's throat tightened. He leaned in closer, squeezing her hand. "Nothing's going to happen," he said softly, but his voice trembled. "Because I'll be there. Every step." She gave him a tired smile. "You can't promise that." "I can promise this," he said, rising to his feet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The room seemed to still. Slowly, he knelt beside the bed, his knees pressing into the cold tile floor, his heart pounding louder than the machines around them. "Rebecca," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Marry me. Not out of pity. Not because I'm afraid, but because I love you, because I choose you every single day. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved." Rebecca's eyes filled instantly. She looked down at the man before her, strong and sure in a way she had never expected, but still, her voice cracked with fear. "I'm a sick woman, Christian," she whispered. "I can't give you a perfect life." Christian reached up, took her hand, and pressed it to his heart. "Then let me be the one who gets to take care of you. You and Lily, you've already healed the parts of me I didn't know were broken." She blinked rapidly, struggling to hold back the flood. Across the room, Lily sat on a small plastic chair by the window, drawing a picture with intense focus. She giggled softly, her bright hair glowing in the light, completely unaware of the gravity unfolding behind her. Rebecca looked at her daughter, at the small miracles she had somehow raised through storms and silence, at the reason she had fought so hard to live. Lily glanced up and caught her mother's eyes, and smiled. That smile, innocent, whole, full of trust, was what made Rebecca turn back to Christian. Her voice shook, but her answer was clear. "Yes," she said. Her eyes glistened. "Yes, I'll marry you." Christian didn't cheer or laugh. He just exhaled, as though the whole world had been holding its breath with him. He rose, kissed her knuckles, then her forehead. They didn't need to say more, because in that tiny room, in the midst of pain and uncertainty, they had made something real. A vow, not to perfection, but to presence. Not to easy days, but to facing every hard one together. Spring came early that year. Rebecca stood by the window of their sunlit room, watching the gentle ripples of the lake shimmer beneath the soft breeze. Her skin had color again, warm, healthy. Her cheeks held the pink flush of renewed strength. And though her hair was still short, it had started to grow in soft waves, the same golden hue that once framed her face. When the doctor told her the tumor had shrunk and showed no signs of spreading, she hadn't cried. She had simply closed her eyes and exhaled, for the first time in what felt like years, without fear. They waited a few more weeks, just to be sure. Then they planned the wedding. It was held on a Saturday morning in late May, on the edge of Christian's lakefront estate. The skies were a watercolor blue, dotted with clouds too delicate to shade the sun. White lilies bloomed along the path to the archway, their petals dancing in the breeze, like they, too, were celebrating. Christian stood beneath the floral arch in a soft gray suit, no tie, his hands clasped tightly in front of him as he watched the house. His heart beat in his throat. Then the doors opened. Rebecca stepped out, barefoot on the stone patio, her silk gown whispering around her ankles. Her hair was pinned gently to one side with the old crystal hair clip, faded now but radiant with meaning. Her eyes met his, and in that instant, everything else fell away. She walked slowly, with Lily ahead of her, scattering handfuls of white rose petals down the aisle with dramatic flair. The guests, only a small group of close friends and the medical team who had helped save her, watched with quiet smiles and teary eyes. When Rebecca reached Christian, he took her hands like they were sacred. Neither of them looked at the officiant. Their eyes never left each other. They spoke their vows softly, in voices that trembled not from fear, but from knowing. Christian went first. "I found you when I had nothing left," he said, voice thick with emotion. "And you gave me everything." Rebecca smiled, her eyes glistening. "You saw me when I didn't recognize myself," she said, "and you loved me anyway. That love, it brought me back." When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Christian didn't hesitate. He kissed her with reverence and joy, the kind of kiss that says, "Thank you for surviving. Thank you for staying. Thank you for saying yes." Lily jumped up and clapped, shouting, "They did it!" And somewhere in the distance, the lake sparkled like it too was applauding. The wedding wasn't grand, but it was perfect because it wasn't about chandeliers or champagne. It was about three people who had once been broken in different ways, finally finding their way back to each other and choosing every day to be whole together. 1 year later, the world looked different. Not because the skyline had changed or the markets Christian once monitored had slowed, but because his life had found a new rhythm, one filled with laughter, softness, and something deeper than success could ever offer. In the past 12 months, Rebecca's strength had returned like spring after a cruel winter. Her energy was back, Her cheeks glowed with health. The scarf she once wore gave way to short, radiant curls kissed by sunlight. Her smile, unfiltered, unburdened, was now a daily part of their world. Lily had grown taller, her voice more curious, her imagination more vivid. She spoke in half English, half fantasy, weaving tales about castles and dragons and magical daddies who saved the day. Her hair was always tied into uneven pigtails, bouncing with every skip. Together, the three of them traveled across Europe. Paris, where Lily fed birds at the Seine and giggled at Christian's terrible French. Florence, where Rebecca stood in front of old paintings and cried because she was finally alive to see them. And Santorini, where they watched sunsets so brilliant they forgot to take photos. Their final stop was a quiet beachside resort tucked away on a Greek island, far from tourists, far from noise, just the sound of waves and the occasional distant laughter of another traveler. That evening they lay side by side on a wooden lounge chair made for two, but somehow it fit three. Rebecca rested against Christian's chest, her sun-kissed legs stretched out. Lily curled in between them, her small head rising and falling with her mother's breath. The sun was setting, painting the sky in warm amber and soft coral. The breeze carried the scent of salt and something sweet, maybe honeysuckle from the cliff above. Christian kissed Rebecca's temple, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is it," he murmured. "This is the life I never knew I needed." Rebecca reached over and laced her fingers with his. "And it all started," she said, her voice full of wonder, "with one little girl and one tiny plastic hair clip." Lily giggled. "Told you I bought the best dad ever." They laughed quietly, not the laughter of punchlines, but the kind that comes when the heart is at peace. They stayed like that as the light faded, as the stars peeked out one by one. No rush, no agenda, just being. Just breathing. Later they kicked off their sandals and wandered down to the shoreline. The sand was warm beneath their feet, still holding the memory of the day's sun. Waves lapped at their ankles as they walked together, Christian on one side, Rebecca on the other, and Lily skipping between them, holding both their hands. Then Lily pulled free and dashed ahead, spinning in circles, her dress billowing, laughter rising like music into the night air. Christian and Rebecca followed, slower, side by side, their fingers still entwined. She looked at him. "You know, I used to think life had passed me by," he smiled. "And I used to think I had everything, until I realized I had nothing that really mattered." Their eyes met. No need for more words. As the moon climbed higher, the three of them ran along the sand, their footprints fading with the tide. Lily's giggles echoed across the shore, Rebecca's laughter joined it, and Christian, once the man known for silence, laughed louder than them both. They weren't perfect. They didn't share blood, but they shared everything that counted. Love, choice, healing, and a home not made of walls, but of people who refused to let go when it mattered most. In the end, the world kept spinning. Markets rose and fell, time moved forward, but on that beach under that sky, a little girl who once tried to buy a dad now had a family she didn't have to buy, because love had already claimed her. Thank you for joining us for this beautiful journey of healing, hope, and the kind of love that chooses you even when life doesn't. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the hearts that choose to stay, then we invite you to be part of our storytelling family. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartwarming, emotional, true-to-life tales that remind us what truly matters. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that just might change your day or your heart. And always remember, sometimes the smallest act of courage, like handing someone a plastic hair clip, can open the door to a brand new life. We'll see you in the next story.